And welcome back. We are in the top 5, folks. The top 5 strongest Captain Class Shinigamis, in my personal opinion. And we are on to the former 8th Division Captain, current 1st Division and head captain of the 13 Court Guard Squad, Shunsui Kyōraku. Now, with the 4 remaining characters I have here, should note that he does beat 1 or 2 of the characters, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, that rank higher than them. Remember, when I ranked these guys, I had ranked them in sense of if I were to pit them all against each other in like a one-on-one fight with no prep time, with no immediate knowledge of set abilities, who would come out on top? And then I basically scored it from there. It's like, okay, who won the majority of the fights here, there, and there? But that being said, there's a reason I think he comes in at number 5. So Shunsui Kyōraku is one of the oldest captains in the 13 Court Guard Squad. He's also clearly one of the strongest as well. He's cool. He's level-headed. He is sneaky as F. He's not afraid to fight dirty whatsoever. And that comes a lot from his knowledge, knowing that, once you go into a war, both sides are in the wrong. That's basically how he kind of described it. And it's illustrated with his tactics, techniques. He's a master swordsman, dual wielding, which is something we don't see many people doing. He's skilled master of Shunpo, Kido. We don't really see him in hand-to-hand combat, but we can assume he's also a highly skilled in hand-to-hand combat. It's just not a specialty. Obviously, one of his main go-tos is his Zanpakuto, Katen Kyotsu, which brings children's games to life. One of my personal favorite Zanpakutos, to be sure. So Katen Kyotsu has many different abilities depending on its mood. Katen Kyotsu. Katen Kyotsu, where are we now? I'm trying to find, there we go. Katen Kyotsu. And it has many different abilities based on its mood. It's one of those swords that is actually very, think words here. It's very driven by its own personality. So even though Shunsui might want to use a certain ability of the sword, it doesn't actually allow him to use it unless it's in the proper mood to use it. And that translates into a very finicky but very dangerous play because you never know when the game is going to change. And the one issue with the game is that the opponent must know the rules of the game, so it's fair. Otherwise, they could be taken advantage of. Katen Kyotsu's gains number in at least half a dozen, if I'm not mistaken. There are 6 known games to the Shikai. There are probably more because there are God knows how many chosen games. Bushogama is one of the it's kind of an offensive but defensive technique as well, where it's based off a spinning top game. And basically it just fires a wind gust that's powerful enough to counter a Sero. The Takaoni is the one game where the person on top wins. It creates a giant like tornado of wind. But unfortunately, Stark hid the nature of this technique's true ability, so it's really hard to figure out what the actual effect is. Kageoni, the shadow one, which is a lot of people's favorite, not my personal favorite, though I do really like it, where he hides, where whoever's shadow gets, basically, if you get your shadow stepped on, you lose, and blade basically jettisons out from the point of contact. But he allows Shunsui also to manipulate shadows, hide in shadows. He can make shadow duplicates of himself. He's going to attack multiple opponents at multiple angles. Iraoni, the color demon, or illustrious demon, which is my personal favorite, is a color game. It is complicated. So basically, you call out a color and you have to strike the color. If you say white, you have to strike something white. Otherwise, it's not going to cut. But the trick is the amount of damage is based on the amount of the color that you called out that you're wearing. So example, when Shunsui called out gray when he was fighting Stark, he hit Stark's wrist, which was gray, but he only got like a minor cut because Shunsui wasn't wearing any gray. Stark called out white, and he's wearing a solid amount of white. He hit Shunsui in the back, who's wearing a lot of white. and it dealt a solid amount of damage. But then Shunsui took off his captain cloak, was wearing nothing but black, called out black, hit Stark in his hollow hole, and because he's wearing nothing but black and concentrated all that damage into one small point, it was a lethal shot. So it's a very difficult, not even difficult, unique technique. And it is one of my favorite. I just thought that was a very cool technique. Daruma-san Gon Korodan, or the Daruma doll fell down. After Shunsui or his opponent are being marked as it, it's basically tag, is what red light, green light. Marked as it, the other combatant travels towards them on a trail of Ryatsu left by air attack in order to catch them by surprise. However, if the combatant sees who is it, while the opponent's moving, the opponent loses it and thus dies. The game is like red light, green light. And then finally there is Kagekuri, shadow sending. By staring hard enough at their shadow, Shunsui or his opponent can project an after image in a location. The higher the opponent's Ryokaku, or Ryatsu, the more the realistic the after image appears. The game, it basically represents a children's game where they stare at shadows on the ground for several seconds, looking at their surface, allowing them to see an after image of the shadow. It's an interesting technique, to say the least. Then, obviously, there's his Bankai, one of the most metal Bankais there is. Katen Kyotsu Keramatsu Shinju. Whereas his Shikai brings children's games to life into a real type of attack, his Bankai brings an entire play to life. And they are represented in first act, second acts, basically, or dons. First act is, Ichidan Danme Tamara Ikazu no Wakajacha. Or, frankly, I'm just going to go with the English translated names because I'm going to butcher these to shit. The first act, hesitant and appropriate, what the hell? Apportionment of wounds. Basically, they each share the same wounds the others have. But he notes that no one can die from this. Then there is the second act, Pillow of Shame. Like red lesions and holes appear on the opponent and cause them to bleed. And basically, weakens the opponent. Then there is Act 3, the Severing Abyss. A massive amount of water engulfs both Shunsui and the opponent, who remain within it into one that runs out of Ryatsu and drowns. You compares this to characters from a story who both hurt themselves into gushing water. And then finally, the final done. Thread-cutting scissors upon a blood-streaked throat. After sheathing his swords, Shunsui winds a white thread around his opponent's throat multiple times before pulling it taut, leaving a deep cut in the throat that expands before blowing up their head. Completing the story, he likens this to a regretful man's partner, ignoring his pleas and mercilessly shearing his own throat. So, yeah, it's a pretty beast Bankai. The only downside he does suffer from is that it's an indiscriminate Bankai. And it's implied that that he might actually die using the Bankai if he's not careful. It's clear that he's knows what his Bankai is capable of doing, so he's used it before, at least in practice. So he probably can survive it, but there's probably a risk to it as well. So either way, so let's get over the lieutenants real quick, because these are the guys that we know he can't beat Shunsui. Ikkaku loses flat to Shunsui because he's nowhere near as experienced, nowhere near as strong. He's versatile to be like he's unpredictable, but Shunsui is far more unpredictable just by his nature, and the fact that he knows Kido is very prolific with Kido. He's not afraid to fight dirty. He's just, there's no way Ikkaku could beat him in a fight. Then you have Shuhei. Shuhei would definitely be a little difficult because Shuhei's Shikai ability for Kazushini is to actually heal him. He can even heal from like bifurcations and stuff like that, straight down the middle. So it is a little difficult to say how long Shuhei would last, but quite frankly, Shunsui is actually a very unfortunate opponent for Shuhei because his Shikai gives him plenty of abilities to kind of prevent that. Just because most of his games could just kill him outright if he's not careful. He's also a dual wielder, just like Shuhei is. Even though apparently Shuhei doesn't actually consider his to be dual bladed, but whatever. It's weird. I like Shuhei a lot, but Shuhei is also one of those characters where you're like, dude, get over it. But yeah, and then Bankai to Bankai. See, Bankai to Bankai would be weird. Because both their Bankais would affect the other, sure. And the wound thing wouldn't matter because they would both simultaneously heal from Shuhei's Bankai. And then, like, the illness effect of Shunsui's Bankai, that might be a problem because I don't think Shuhei's Bankai heals illnesses, just heals physical injuries. And then you get the Abyss, which would be unique because they're both Fioratsus are combined. And then you go into his Bankai, which the problem is it wouldn't do any. Like he wouldn't. It would cut his throat, but he'd heal from that immediately. Like in the little I know from the final volume of Can't Fear Your Own World is that when he fights against Ikone, who is the new Soul King candidate, at least by the villain's perspective, that he made. He basically loses his arm, but quickly it heals before he even recognizes what happened. So it's difficult to say, but I don't even think Shunsui would even use his Bankai against his Bankai. I think he would just stick to all of he knows, and he would ultimately outlast him just through sheer his knowledge and experience. Renji could try, but the problem is Zabimaru is a very direct Zanpakuto. It has its moments, sure, but the only real obstacle Shunsui is going to be facing against him is his Bankai, so Zabimaru. And so Zabimaru, again, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's cool, and it's got a powerful ability with Zakatempo, but it's not one of those abilities it's not one of those Zanpakuto that is very handy in a long-range fight, whereas Katenkyotsu is. And even if you take that out of the equation, all that's really got to happen is color game, and now the Bankai effect like Zakatempo doesn't matter because if he can't stab him if he can't stab him, then there's a serious problem here. Now, that being said, he could call Black and try to stab him, sure. But Shunsui would know how to avoid his own attack, too. Because Renji would figure it out just because he has to tell him to figure it out. So, yeah, I mean, he didn't initially do that with Stark, but Stark figured it out. He was going to tell him Stark anyway, but it's like, no, you figured it out quicker than I gave you credit for. So, yeah, against all the three main lieutenants that we had listed in here, yeah, he obviously beats them all. Now getting into the big ones now. He's going to beat most of these guys, but I'll explain why I think that. First off, against Yama and Ichibei. Now, this is really freaking tough. Really freaking tough. If you're going Shikai, because again, Kido, Shimpo, hand-to-hand, that's not going to matter in these kind of fights at this point. But Shikai to Shikai. Let's break both these guys down real quick. Yamamoto's Ryojin Jika. There isn't a lot that Shunsui brings to the table, except maybe Kageone. In the sense that he can avoid the flames and maybe get a hit in on Old Man Yama. Bankai to Shikai, Yama's still using his Shikai while he goes into Bankai. That's when the tables would quickly turn. That is definitely when the tables would quickly turn. But the problem quickly becomes that, because you can tell too, the effects of each act in the Bankai wear off when you go into the next act. So, yeah, so if Yamamoto can sense that there's something wrong here, he would go into Bankai. And the minute he goes into Bankai, that fourth act, which would be the killing blow act, would fail. Because Shunsui has to actually get close enough to do that. And quite frankly, Yamamoto's Ryatsu is burning so hot that it can be shown like flames engulfing him. The heat of the sun is wrapping him to the point where nothing would get through to Yamamoto. When you watch Ewok fight him, nothing, well, the Ewok clone, but when he had that fight with Ewok, nothing got to him. Like, nothing could land. Not energy, not anything solid, nothing could land. So unless it's a very unique attack that could figure out a way around that, I don't see Shunsui beating him just because he'd have to get close enough to do the thread. And B, because I think Yamamoto's Ryatsu burns so hot that other Ryatsu wouldn't work. So even that thread, even if it's from a distance, which I do believe it is from some distance that he's wrapping it, it burns away. So there's nothing he can really do. He would put up a great fight, I think, against Yamamoto, to be sure. But Yamamoto was the head captain for over 1,000 years for a freaking reason. Then you have Ichibei. Ichimonji is one of the most unique Zanpakutos there is. The thing is, Shunsui is a very cautious guy. So I don't think he would, like, if one of the blades got hit and he sensed it was weaker, Katen Kyotsu is no longer a Katen Kyotsu. It is now, and then that's when Shunsui points out, like, it'd be Katen, so it's Kyotsu, my Katen Kyotsu. It's just Ka Kyotsu. It's like, no, it'd be Kyotsu. It's like, you see, I'm sorry to disappoint you, old man Ichibei, or Mad Monk Ichibei, but that's not quite the thing. You see, my sword's quite unique. Two spirits inhabit this blade, Katen and Kyotsu. And so, while he loses some power, he should be one of the few individuals who would immediately avoid that sword to save his life. And when you get to that, because Ichimonji's ink has to touch the thing to make the thing lose its name and everything that name meant, he would be avoiding that thing like the plague. Unfortunately, he'd also be using something like Kageyama to hide in shadows. Now, the first time he uses it, it could definitely be to his benefit, because Ichibei wouldn't be looking for that technique the first time. So he would definitely probably get a good hit on Ichibei at least once. But the problem is, using Kageyama again would be foolish, because he literally can absorb the black off of anything. So, and literally one of his techniques allows him to steal the black of anything and basically rend it to its bones. And yeah, Shunsui's like, no, I can't do that more than once. But then Color Game comes in, and I think the Color Game would be a very unique option against Ichibei, because but unfortunately, I think Ichibei will still take this win, because while it's a unique option against Ichibei, because it's just a unique technique in general, remember, Ichimonji doesn't cut flesh. It cuts names. So it's not doing any damage to Shunsui to begin with. Ultimately, I would go with Ichibei on this. Again, Shunsui is one of the few individuals I can think of that could give both these guys an actual solid fight. And obviously, the other two who are on this list that I haven't gotten to yet are also two individuals who could give both those guys a solid fight. Now I'm moving quickly to some of these other ones now. Against Soifone. Soifone, yeah, I definitely think she would lose against him. She is probably faster than him. She's probably faster than most of the 13 Court Guard by a certain margin. Not a large margin, mind you, but a certain margin. With that being said, though, and she's probably better in hand-to-hand combat, but she's also extremely, not hot-headed, that's not the right term. She is easy to anger. She is easy to anger, take advantage of that anger, as we've seen multiple times. Her pride gets in the way. Well, a way I've really heard it, there's a YouTuber I love named, what's his name? Give me a second, because I'm plugging you right now, because I love your stuff. Mr. Tomo, if I'm getting the name, Mr. Tomo 2304. Great. He's a great Bleach YouTuber. And I don't know if you've done other stuff. I just watched your Bleach stuff, man. I love you. He did like a ranking captains video at one point, like, by the end of the 1,000-Year Blood War, who's the strongest captain. And he brought up a great point that between her and Hitsugaya, they represent powerful potential, but they're limited and held back by their immaturity. They're very young and immature captains, and you can see that by the decisions they make and why they make them. And I think Shunsui would take a very big advantage of that. Plus, he's not dumb enough to get caught by that Suzume Bachi, that's for certain. Shunko might give him a bit of a problem, but he's skilled enough in Kido, and honestly, he's probably a master of Kido, because he used a level 70 Hado without any problem whatsoever. We don't know what his level of mastery is, but we know he's probably a master. Probably not a Uehara or a Byakuya, I'd say, but damn near close. Or apparently a Mayuri. Or a Unohana. I mean, again, right in that area, though. So that's enough to counter Shunko, plus with his blades. And again, the color, I always got to bring it up. The color game is actually a great stopgap kind of a technique. Because if she comes in with Shunko, but he's got the color game active, yeah, he might get a bit of the brunt of the impact, but it's like, poof, sorry, you didn't name a color. So, And then they have to go toe to toe again. Only now it's like a lot more difficult for her. Bankai to Bankai. She better hope she doesn't use her Bankai when he activates his. That being said, she doesn't like to use her Bankai because she feels it goes against her pride as a Stealth Force member. Yeah, guess what? You were up against the Grim Reaper who was literally dissolving everything around you. Suck it up, which she did. But, yeah, it's like, I don't want to work with you because you work with Uehara, and I hate Uehara. Yeah, suck it up. God. I really don't want... Suigon's abilities are cool. The concept of the character is cool. Her personality is terrible. I really dislike her personality. But no, she would definitely lose to Shunsui. Against Gin and Rose. Rose definitely would lose to him. Mostly because he'd figure out that his Bankai would probably be something sound-based based on the Shikai. And he'd either cover his ears or he would quickly go in for the kill before. Again, he can make shadow clones, so use a shadow clone as a distraction, go in and cut his throat. Shunsui's far too underhanded to be taken advantage of by someone like Rose. Gin is a little trickier. Gin is definitely almost as underhanded, if not more underhanded than Shunsui. Problem is, though, Gin's abilities are impressive but limited. Shikai, Shunsui could easily counteract the Shikai. Bankai would be a bit more difficult. Bankai is tricky, though an cross-guard type of block could easily avoid a slice from Kamishina no Yari. And again, Color Game. Color Game could easily save his ass from that sword. I'm going to bring the Color Game up when it's prudent, and the Color Game, honestly, is not just a fun technique and dangerous, but also a lifesaver. Like, if he goes to the Oni, right when he's about to be hit by Kamishini, he doesn't get cut. So, then, of course, Bankai to Bankai, Bankai to Bankai is unique in this circumstance, because theoretically, Kamishina no Yari could hit him immediately. Unfortunately, again, if he leaves the shard of the blade in there, it's like, are you sure you want to be doing that? And Ichimara-san, like, oh, why is that the new head captain? The first act, wound sharing hesitation. It's like, what? It's like, Any wound inflicted on the other will be inflicted on the other one as well. To which he's like, so if you decide to activate that little bit of poison you sharded into my body, well, that sounded bad. You slipped into my body, you'll be suffering the same effects. And that would cause him to be like, ugh. To which would probably allow Shunsui to actually quickly kind of go poke and just like, okay, yeah. Because I don't think he'd take it in his chest. He'd probably get it like in his arm or something like that. So he'd either remove his arm or he'd just kind of pry it out and take that little sliver out. So ultimately, I would say that, yeah, Gin loses. Unohana, if you remember Unohana, she is one of the only ones I think one of the few people I think legitimately straight out beats him in a fight, because her Kido is to the point where she might actually be able to survive the effects of his Bankai, which are monstrous, by the way, like terrible. Like your neck is sliced and your head freaking blows up. It's not an ability that's faint for the heart. And then, obviously, hesitating, sharing wound, all that. But because of her Kaido ability, or healing Kido, I actually fully believe she's one of the few people who would beat him legitimately in a fight, because I think she's most likely better than him in swordsmanship. She's clearly better than him in Kido. Probably comparable to him in Shunpo. And then, hand-to-hand's difficult. That one's difficult, because we never actually saw her in a legit hand-to-hand combat with, like, Kenpachi in their fight. Either way, she's definitely someone I think would be capable of beating him, surprisingly. Which may also play into the fact that everyone's kind of afraid of Unohana, except for Kenpachi. Like, Kenpachi was never afraid of Unohana, but he also was weaker than her and just wanted to fight her at the time. Shinji, I think, would lose to him, mostly because his Bankai could negate the effects, not negate, but make Sakanada useless. And he's smart enough to figure out the trick with Sakanade, and then activate abilities in accordance with that. That being said, Sakanade, because I finished reading the volume 2 a while back, about a week or two ago, for Can't Fear Your Own World, Sakanade is a lot more powerful than we even give it credit for. Like, it's a tricky freaking ability. Byakuya. Now, this was a fun thing I read. Apparently, if Shunsui were to be fired from his position as head captain, Byakuya would probably be the next likely candidate to be a Captain Commander. And I found that interesting. It's like, when I thought about, like, of everyone who's left in the 13 Court Guard squad, he is the most well-rounded. And I think that's kind of what they look for. Well-rounded, powerful, and knows how to, responsible. So, of course, if it was Byakuya, he'd probably, like, keep Kenpachi in the barracks at all times. It's like, I don't like Kenpachi. Whatever. That's not entirely true. Byakuya, he's not really a fan of Kenpachi, but he still respects him in terms of his strength. But in terms of these two going at it, this would be a very cool fight to watch. I could see this being a very fun fight. And I mean, you get a little bit of this kind of stuff in the Reigai arc, but I mean like a true one-on-one fight between these guys. Shikai is Shikai. Zenbo Zakura is very unique and useful, but Bishaguma can blast it away. Katen Kyotse is just far more versatile, so right off the bat, he loses that. In terms of sheer swordsmanship, I'll also give it to Shunsui because he's dual-wielding. And that's it's actually a much harder skill because you need to not just know where one hand's going, but simultaneously know where the other one's going and act accordingly. Shimpo to Shimpo, that's difficult. It's implied that Byakuya is one of the fastest captains, as we got that fight with Zoma Mari. So I might actually put him a little above Shunsui in terms of speed. And Kido, surprisingly, we've seen him demonstrate higher levels of Kido than Shunsui, but that's only because we didn't see the full gambit of what Shunsui was capable of using in terms of Kido. So it's a bit hit and miss here. Ultimately, though, it would come down to the Bankai, and again, his Bankai would just be a serious problem to deal with for Byakuya. Just because he maybe tries to overwhelm him with some Zakura blades, and all of a sudden he bursts into blood as well. And that the disease one, the second act, what was the name of that one again? 1 second. The Pillow of Shame. Remember, that was being used on Lily Barrel when he was a being made of light at that point, not technically flesh and blood anymore. Used that on a flesh and blood individual, that technique takes on a whole nother meaning now. So it's a very unique circumstance for unliving bodies. Then obviously the Severing Abyss. Against most captains, that's not going to really matter. And then the white thread severing technique. Yeah, Shunsui, I do have to give the win to Shunsui here. And then we move on to our favorite dog guy who really got the brunt end of the stick when I really compared him to everyone else. Sajin. Sajin gets his ass handed to him. Like, seriously, Sajin is he's a trooper. God bless Sajin, he tries. But he is just nothing compared to most of these captains, comparatively. Like, it's about this pride and trying to repay his debt and all that. And I can really appreciate that about the character. But he really does not measure up to other captains. It's like Shunsui. Because that freaking Kokujo Tenga Myo, because they both will share the wound of the other, Shunsui just has to attack one or the other, and the other's screwed. That's basically it. He's clearly more knowledgeable in Kido. He's a better swordsman. His Shimpo is probably better as well, quite frankly. His Shikai is far more dangerous than just brute force. Saji's also one of the captains who's very quick to go to Bankai, and just made him a bigger target, frankly. It's just, he's very outclassed when it comes to Shunsui. Not to mention the underhanded tactics, especially Kageoni in that case, because the giant's shadow is huge, and then he's just stabbing the giant. So again, then against the ninth captain, company captains, Kensei is unfortunately also one of the weakest captains. He really is. He tries and he fails so hard. I feel bad. Kensei is cool. His Zanpakuto actually, despite being very simplistic, is cool too. But because Shunsui doesn't even have to hit him to do damage with his blade. He can attack him from a distance and be fine. And then, hide in shadow, Kageone, Iraone. I don't know if the Iraone would work against the explosive effect of Tekken Kazushini. Tekken Tachikaze, sorry. But it's still something worth noting. Tozen, yeah, he would lose to Shunsui. I fully believe that. Tozen, it would be a little tricky, especially when he goes into Bankai. But I feel like Shunsui basically, the Bankai would actually give him an out because he can just hide in the shadow of the Bankai. Like the darkness that's in the Bankai would be perfect for him. And then when he disappears, thinks that Kageone is like, tells him like, where did he go? And then she deactivates the Bankai because he doesn't know where he went. And ultimately just Shunsui suddenly emerges and just slices him. And they fight again. And again, Iraoni. Iraoni is a perfect counter. It's like, boom. Sorry. In fact, that would actually be perfect. Because Iraoni means if he doesn't call out a color, Toza doesn't call out a color, he's not cutting Shunsui. So the minute that blade hits him, he can grab the blade, not quite the same way as Kenpachi did it, but grab it, finds it, got you, white, and it just hits him, and then done. Or there you go. So yeah, Toza would actually get pretty badly wrecked. Hitsugaya would also lose to Shunsui. Now, Shunsui points out that in 100 years, Hitsugaya could easily surpass him. He could. But as it stands right now, Shunsui is the stronger of the two. He's clearly the better swordsman. Again, very much similar circumstance to Soifeng, where his maturity, Toshiro's maturity, is a big factor in this, where he is very easy to go off the rails if something bad happens to like Momo or something. Again, add in the trickiness of Katen Kyotsu. The experience of Shunsui as well is a big factor in this because he can strategize far better than Toshiro can. And then activate, considering Bankai. Yeah, Toshiro would most likely lose. Now, if this fight goes on long enough, adult Toshiro might be a problem. But again, he's smart enough to realize I can't let the fight drag on because he could beat me if I'm not careful. Now, time for the big one. And obviously, I'm a big fan of Mr. K-Dog here. And I do think he ranks higher, obviously. But does he beat Shunsui in a fight? And I actually really had a hard time thinking about figuring out whether or not he would actually win or not. Because remember that Shinigami battles are a battle of Ryatsu. And if your Ryatsu's weak, weaker than your opponents, it's not going to do anything. Aizen demonstrated this with Soifeng when her two-step kill did not work against him. Kenpachi himself even demonstrated this in this first fight with Ichigo, when Ichigo tried to cut him, didn't cut him, and hurt himself. And Kenpachi clearly has the most Ryatsu of anyone in the 13 Court Guard squad, including Shunsui, and by a large factor, too. So the question becomes, do any of these techniques work on Kenpachi first and foremost? So Kageone could probably work. Iraone could probably work. Bushogo probably isn't going to do a damn thing. We don't know what Takeone does. I honestly don't think the color games, like the one second, I want to get that name. Durama-san go Korodan, or Durama Doll fell down. And Kagekure, I don't think either of them really matter. Kenpachi's battle instinct's enough that those kind of techniques aren't going to be playing aren't going to be doing much. Kenpachi, I would also argue, is probably comparable to Shunsui in terms of his swordsmanship, if not better, just because that is what Kenpachi does. That is his specialty, his bread and butter. And he is not just skilled, just a raw, merciless skill, but he's also unpredictable too, as we've seen in many fights. Niratora, Ichigo. We see it with Gremi. We see it with Unohana to some degree. Yeah, like Kenpachi is not a idiot. He's actually a very intelligent fighter. He just prefers exercise, but he can figure out weaknesses. He is a very perceptive individual to the point that's actually kind of scary. He's also quite skilled barehanded. He's strong enough to lift Gerard Valkyrie without any problem and then go toe-to-toe with a man. Clearly cutting power-wise, he completely outclasses Shunsui. Shimpo-wise, we don't know how solid his Shimpo really is. We do know he has it, surprisingly. But we don't know how solid it is compared to Shunsui. The issue obviously came down for me when it came to a eye patch release Kenpachi with a Bankai versus the Bankai of Shunsui. And the problem here I found was the first Dan's going to affect them both. But the bigger problem was I don't know if Shunsui's dumb enough to go into Bankai against Kenpachi. Because if he's already dealing out some damage with Iraoni, Kageone, and some of the other games, Kenpachi can soak all that up with no problem. So if he goes into Bankai, it's going to be a lot worse, I think, for Shunsui than it is for Kenpachi. Like, even if Kenpachi gets a solid shot in him down his chest, that's just one gash that appears on Kenpachi versus the numerous amounts that Shunsui maybe got on him. So I don't even know if it's smart enough for Shunsui to do damage to Kenpachi and then go into Bankai. I really don't. And so, but hypothetically, that's the problem here. Hypothetically, if we go past that, and let's say he has done less damage to Kenpachi than Kenpachi's done to him, does that Kenpachi will just ignore the first Dawn, because that's what Kenpachi, I can say Dawn. It was called Dawn in the manga. Dawn. Second Dawn, I really think he'll just ignore that, especially if he's in Bankai. Third Dawn is like a suicide mission, because Kenpachi Ratsu is far more than Shunsui's. The question I had to ask myself when ultimately deciding who would win this fight between the two of them is, would Kenpachi survive the final act, the thread-cutting scissors upon a blood-streaked throat? To me, I'm like, okay, is Kenpachi durable enough to survive that? Is his Ryatsu enough to overwhelm that? And I had to unfortunately say no. Even though I love Kenpachi, no. I do think that technique would be the technique that kills Kenpachi. But take this for that. So yes, I give the win ultimately to Shunsui, but Shunsui would be hard-pressed to beat Kenpachi. Like, seriously. He would have to pull out every freaking trick he had to kill Kenpachi. But I do think he would ultimately win. I do think Shunsui would beat Kenpachi. It would be a hell of a fight, though. And then Mayuri, he beats Mayuri a lot more easily. Just because he's far trickier than Mayuri. Mayuri has to hit you with his blade to do something. Otherwise, it's kind of useless. His Bankai, the poison can be a factor, certainly. But Shunsui could hide in shadow. And actually, he can literally hide in like a pocket dimension of shadow. That's how cool it is. So he can just avoid it with Kageyone. Then he just pops out and slices Mayuri down. Mayuri is not that skilled of a swordsman compared to a lot of these guys. Ultimately, though, Mayuri is tricky enough that he would pose a problem, I think, to Shunsui, just because he's very versatile. Apparently, his Kido knowledge is through the roof. Like, he's one of the most proficient Kido users there is. But Shunsui, I feel, is just more dangerous to deal with. And just more skilled and more experienced. So I would go with Shunsui in that regard. Last up, we'll go with Rukia first, actually. Rukia, again, I think would lose to Shunsui. Shunsui will be able to stay after his first initial confrontation with Rukia, like in a duel, he noticed the abilities of this. And Rukia, I feel like, would be one of those people to brag about their abilities a little bit, because she did. She did that as not. And then Shunsui basically just like, okay, I'm going to avoid that now. And then she goes, Bankai. He hides, again, hiding in shadow. It's like Bankai. I believe it was a Haka Togame. And then all of a sudden, boom, he pops out of shadow, like, hi there! And just slices her. Yeah, unfortunately, Rukia, I imagine she's gotten more control where she can probably either thaw out quicker now or actually move a bit in that form. But, yeah, it's a great Bankai, but it is like a one-shot Bankai. Last but not least, Urahara. And I will be flat out honest. I think Urahara wins that fight. We know he's the smartest individual in Soul Society. He's not as old as Shunsui, so he doesn't have the experience advantage, but he's still very tactical, very experienced. Plans for 1,000 different outcomes. Is a Kido master. We know that he can use novel 99 Hado, because he does in the Can't Fear Your Own World novel. We don't know if Shunsui is actually capable of doing something like that. We can assume he might be, but we know for a fact Urahara can, and without incantation if he wants. So right off the bat, he's clearly got the advantage in Kido. Prep time. His Benihime also is arguably as versatile, if not more versatile, than Katen Kyotsu. Benihime is one of my personal favorite Zanpakutos. Toes. And I'm not trying to, trying to wank off Urahara here. I'm literally saying that these two, I think, are comparable in terms of versatility and how dangerous they are. Because while Katen Kyotsu makes children gains a reality, I believe Benihime's standard ability is to restructure energy or spiritual pressure or spiritual energy, Ratsu, into whatever Urahara wants. So, and then the Bankai obviously restructures anything it touches. That's why you get different variants on the offensive ability of Urahara. You get the shield. In the movie, he has an ability called Shred, where he activates the shield and fires like razor bullets at someone of energy. Then there's obviously Shibari Benihime, which is the net. I can never remember the. It's something. It's basically where he then stabs his sword into the net, and by each connected point in the net, it explodes into this freaking nuclear option explosion. And then he's got the technique where he actually negates something by spinning Benihime around and just negating it, the attack. And he's smart enough to quickly pick up on what Shuei's laying down with the games. He's clearly as good of a swordsman. He's actually probably better at hand-to-hand combat because he was part of the second division. He's arguably also as effective of a Shunpo user as, if not better than Shunsui, because again, he was part of the second division. So yeah, this would be another one I'd be like, oh, I'd love to see them actually do this. Trust me, if I ever did if I actually went into animation, this would be on my list of stuff. Like doing animations of like these captains fighting it out would be really cool to do, and I would love to do it. But I'd probably be too busy with other who would wins and stuff like that. But ultimately, yeah, I'd go to Urahara in this fight, absolutely. But ultimately, that is my opinion. What do you think? Put in the comments below. Till then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. As always, if you want us to review something, put in the comments below. Let us know. We'll get to a review of it at some point. Ideas for who would win, Star Wars, Superior Magic, what if, anything new on the channel. Put that in the comments below as well. I'll get to that at some point. Hit that bell if you want notifications. I will be pre-recording one of my videos for tomorrow. I'll get home early enough to actually do my videos, so it won't be that big of an issue. But I want to pre-record one so I can pre-record Tuesdays as well. It's, pre-recording. Just busy weeks. Till then, thanks for watching. See you later.